Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. On this episode, I have Vindhya Barwal. I hope I've pronounced that correctly.
Yes.
Welcome to the show. Now, Vindhya, you are the head of reputation and influence at the Colony Group, but you're also a sessional academic at UQ in gaming cultures. So, Vindhya, there's a whole bunch of questions that I want to ask you because I read through your bio and it's just amazing. But the first one I'm going to ask is why education?
Awesome. Well, firstly, Philip, thanks so much for having me on your podcast today. And thank you for the kind introduction as well. Now, to answer your question, why education? I've always been a nerd, honestly. I was one of those students, even at UQ, when I was studying, doing my master's. I was one of the ones sitting on the front row, raising my hands, answering questions. It's just the curiosity in me. And I thought that the professors that I had at uni, they really, really motivated me to sort of pass it on. They were such amazing mentors that they made me think that even if I move on to the professional career path, I do want to have that sort of tie back to the university as well. And hopefully, and I've received some wonderful emails as the semesters just ended at uni as well. It's good to see that students feel motivated or they feel like they're learning new things. So it's one of those things where I've received so much wonderful mentorship that the giving back of it is very, very rewarding.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, it's funny how different parts of our education speak to us in a different way and engage us and keep us motivated. But also we have our passions and just you're a gamer, which all my students, they all at one stage or another are talking about whatever video game they are playing and the different methods and guns, and
Yeah.
you know more of the lingo than I do, and they absolutely love it. And you lecture on gaming culture. So I mean, I see kids gaming all the time, and we see esports is coming like massively in the school space. A friend and colleague of mine runs the Fuse Cup, which integrates gaming, but also a lot of cyber safety, anti-bullying. Is that
There have been
is
some
that
wonderful things. Yeah.
Yeah, is that something that I guess with gaming culture, like what does it actually
Mm.
encompass?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with gaming cultures, it's think of it like you study film, right? You analyze movies, you sort of compare them to real life. You talk about how the production of the making of the film is just as important as, I guess, the encoding and the decoding are both just as important. So it's the same thing with video games that we talk about a lot of things in the course that I teach. The first part that we start with is the production side of it, where we sort of start by talking about why it really matters to have authentic voices during the production part of the process. So you can't talk about women, you can't talk about, people from diverse backgrounds unless you actually did the research or spoke to the people and had them involved in the process of producing the video game. And then we sort of talk about, encoding of messaging. We talk about this concept of procedural rhetoric, whereby when you play a video game, essentially it's got rhetoric or it's trying to tell you something, convey some message, or it's kind of trying to persuade you into believing some sort of ideology. So we break that down depending on which video game we're analyzing. So for example, if the game, if you die, you're dead and you begin from the very beginning, it's not very rewarding, and it's telling you that in order to get good at this game, you just have to be good, and until you don't, none of this matters. Like it's not incremental progress. So yeah, there's a lot of different aspects to it, but and then you also talk about sort of the decoding of it and how, I guess, for example, a game made in the US, the political ideologies embedded within it or some other things embedded within it may not make a lot of sense to someone who's, say, from a communist country, and they might find it difficult to decode that messaging within the video game. And some video games play with that because they're like, oh, we want to make it so that we sort of create a little debate in or critical thinking in the minds of players. So it's all awesome stuff. And yeah, I've been a gamer my whole life, and I did my master's thesis as well on ethical decision making using video games, and I actually used Skyrim as my case study to do it. And then I decided that even though I went down that professional route of doing media campaigns, and we've done some awesome stuff with Prime Video, Netflix, Garnier, some really, really cool things, but always wanted to keep the next generation interested in the depth of, the things you can achieve with video games, not just, yeah, I play, I rage, and, I'm competing with my friends, but there's so much more to it. There's so much to achieve. There's so much to socialize. There's so much to decode and encode. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, for me, I mean, showing my age, yes, we had video games. My first video game I ever played was on an Atari Master System, monochrome, and we played Pong, and that was just wild for, you know, in the early '80s
Yeah.
when it came out. Definitely showing my age, but I've seen games progress tremendously, and the subcultures of gamers coming through for those who love, like you said, they love playing. There's some who love developing, love coding, they love the back end. Others just are all about just the competition and see who's the best.
Yes.
Is that a does your classroom get heated when those sort of discussions come out? Because I mean, you're talking about cultures and everyone's got their viewpoints. So does that does that make for a sometimes tricky classroom?
So it varies. I've been teaching this course for maybe 4 or 5 years now, and that's pretty much since the inception of the course because it's quite new. And we've had different sorts of cohorts of students every year. So if they are, say, a good mix of domestic students, Australian students, and international students, maybe there's a bit more of a conversation because I guess the Western world is a bit more extroverted or a bit more participatory in that manner compared to, say, my most recent class, which is just finished, which is majority international students, which is not to say that it's not, it's a great class nonetheless. We just have to work around the way in which we get students to participate. So maybe instead of doing debates, maybe instead of being like, hey, volunteer if you want to say something, maybe we have to do some different types of activities, something a bit more analytical, something a bit more, I guess you make them break down in groups and sit down and actually discuss something together before bringing it up to the classroom with, say, they choose someone dedicated to volunteer to speak on their behalf. So you work around these different things, and I think that makes it exciting because every year it's something new depending on who's sitting in your class.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit like my classrooms as well. It's just every year is a different group, and then even sometimes, like as the cohort, that same cohort moves through, they get different ideas, they get different processes. They have a new perspective because they've learned something new, or they've they've built a relationship with someone outside of their normal social circle. So
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I tell my students as well, because it's gaming cultures and it's ever evolving, I can't know everything about it. So I go into it with that sort of mentality that, hey, I want this to be quite horizontal. Of course, there's all this information, theoretical knowledge that I have that they may not have at this point. But when I introduce a theory and give them a few examples, I like for them to teach me as well about the games that they're playing currently and how they can connect the dots because there are so many games and so many that I haven't heard of. One of the recent assignments that I was marking, some of the students had done these video essays on games that I've never heard of in different languages and completely different concepts to what I am used to playing myself because I usually go for RPGs and sometimes FPS games, but not very often. Yeah, it's super interesting to see the pedagogical lens kind of differs with class to class, but also I think I learn so much from students just as much as they learn from me.
yeah, well, that yeah, learning from your students is it's something that we all want to do. We want to be open to do. Now, sometimes it's a little bit harder because sometimes you're just like, oh no, that's my job. I shouldn't be learning from you. I'm supposed to be, and so it does pose a bit of a challenge. But on that, so you've worked with in your other career as well, in your marketing and PR and all those things. So you've worked with big brands, so Lego,
Yes.
which all the gamers love as well. Netflix, you've worked with McDonald's, so you're working
Yeah.
with international corporations. So how did that come about? Was it education first or PR? And Does it's sort of a two-pronged question.
Mm.
Does that experience help within the classroom and vice versa? So just that stakeholder relationship.
Yeah, it does. It helps a lot, actually. I feel like if I were purely in the academic line or purely in the professional line, there's so much knowledge that I wouldn't have gotten. So I feel like for my students, for example, instead of going after a niche example or trying to find something from my research, I can actually give them an example out of my own experiences working for Maccas or Netflix or whatever it might be and tell them that because again, we are analyzing video game cultures within my classrooms, but when it comes to what I do for work, or rather what I did for work in my previous role, which was a bit more heavy on the gaming part than it is at the moment. At the moment, I'm trying to bring a bit more gaming into my current work, but the previous one was purely gaming. And in that, it was a bit different than, I guess, what I do in the classroom because here we're trying to get brands in front of video gaming audiences. So in doing that, it's about understanding that world, how gamers communicate with each other, what they find cringeworthy, what they like to talk about, what they feel is authentic, and how does the brand come across in front of gamers without coming across as fake or some, because the thing is with live streams, especially in the video game world, people have anonymity, which means they're going to be really mean sometimes. So
Mhm.
if there's a branded live stream, for example, and I guess there's a streamer on screen and being overly salesy about it, being like, buy this product, it's awesome. They're just going to start commenting, bro, you're such a sellout, or, this sounds so fake. So we have to make sure that like this audience considers itself to be really, it is a smart audience. So you can't underestimate their intelligence. You have to embed yourself within the culture. So I guess in that case, there's a bit of an overlap in understanding cultures. On my educational side of things, I'm sort of making the students understand how to break down what happens in the production process and how to analyze games. On the other end, I'm trying to teach brands to understand how gamers perceive authenticity.
Yeah. Well, I was just
Yeah,
having a conversation just the other night. We
yeah,
were watching just some TV, and generally I stream TV, but we were watching one of the free to air channels, and the advertisements came on, and my one of my adult children said, he goes, like, these advertisers are like 2 years behind
yeah,
where society is. It's like what they're putting up was what was, the way they film, the jittery sort of film, the really short, sharp sort of information trying to get the catch was what people were doing on TikTok and Instagram and other things like two
yeah,
years ago. So it's like, is that that's sort of what you're talking about. So how do you
yeah, but
how do
much
you keep up
faster.
with? Yeah,
Yeah.
and how? I mean, how do you teach that? How do you teach people to not only keep up or watch the trends, but how to keep up and almost predict where you need to go?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why when you're in the advertising world or the public relations world or just the branding side of video games or essentially trying to get brands into that world, you have to be a gamer yourself. You can't not be a gamer because it's not one of those things where, oh, I'm just going to spend like 2 hours in my week just looking at what's the latest thing within gaming. You have to be gaming with your friends, talking to your friends about it, be passionate about it. And that's also the reason why I know we're supposed to talk about education, but my marketing brain and a PR brain's just coming into the picture. So that's sort of the reason also why I see so many of these big agencies failing because they've got amazing, smart people, but they're not gamers. And they'll try and do these pilot sort of campaigns for brands, but they don't fully work because they don't come across as authentic. And they're not going to come across as authentic if you're not a gamer yourself. So it's one of those things. I guess it's a learning curve. Maybe we will see big agencies do better campaigns with time. But like you mentioned, I feel the same way as a gamer myself that I look at ads sometimes that try to embed gaming within them and I go, that's just no one's talking about that anymore. That's old news. Yeah.
Yeah, it moves fast. And look, the conversation we're having, it's on a day-to-day basis with most educators, most teachers who are listening. Like, kids want to be gamers, they want to be YouTubers, they want to be streaming on Twitch, they want to have a tremendous history, they want to communicate a message, they want to speak to their culture, they want to feed from their culture in whatever that is, whether it's gaming or sport or whatever it is. Everyone's got their little niche. And so your your PR and marketing mind is what teachers need to hear, because we sit in classrooms and they're going, well, why do I need to know that? Why do I need to know that? And it's just like,
Yeah,
well, if you actually learn this, and how can we relate it to real world industry? So how do we
absolutely.
relate? Right, I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit. I wanted to get to this, but you're a storyteller yourself.
Mm,
So it's like, how do we teach our students? Yes, you're learning about Romeo and Juliet, or you're learning about you're reading a Tristan Back book, and so he's got his how he writes and how he communicates his story. But he, studied the boring stuff at school, but he learned how to bring those skills into his passion.
absolutely. I think education, it's just such an important thing, right? Like, I look back to why I got into storytelling and gaming and just stories in general. And I go back to thinking about my English teachers from school. They were the ones who made it exciting, the way they talked about Shakespeare, the way they talked about poetry, Keats. And it stayed with me because all the other subjects, well, I mean, I was biased towards history, geography, and English. Everything else made me sort of like snooze, especially math. And I think during those fundamental or foundational years of life, it's so important to have a passionate teacher talk about things and then they stick in your head. And e- that foundation is important, yes, but I think it needs to continue at university level, at postgrad level. And I see it happening a lot of times, but I also see it not happening. And that's just so sad because you can often see someone's passion die because they're like, yeah, I just don't relate to the conversations that are happening in the classroom, which is, yeah, I feel like, again, I understand that there's a lot of pressure in being a teacher and the world is moving so quickly and how do you keep up with everything? But yeah, I think I was actually, funnily enough, my phone was listening to me because it just knew that I was going to talk to you. And I started getting these TikToks about teaching, right? And the very last one that I saw, it was actually a compilation of teachers talking about how they've had to spend a lot of time managing the behavior in the classroom and more time doing that than actually teaching the subject. And yeah, I don't know. I guess this is me putting the question back to you and asking you, have you heard much about that? And where do you think that's coming from?
Yeah, it's a big discussion with classroom management and trying to get kids to buy in,
Hmm.
because they are flooded with reels, with 30-second shorts. Like, you've got to get that hook or you're done. I know, even prior to social media, going into a classroom, the first time you walk in, you've got about 30 seconds. And if you can't capture their attention, or you can't go, hey, I'm actually worth listening to, I do have something to offer you, then you're done. And I know, as a student, I was a terrible student. I was causing all sorts of chaos. But I do know that those teachers who were able to capture my attention, to
Mm.
make it relevant, to say, hey, look, this is what we've got to do. And yeah, it's a little bit boring, but it does have some knock on effects and it is what we're doing. So, you like sport? Hey, if you want to do this, this, and this, you need to understand all these things. You know, you,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, you want to be a professional sportsman, you've got to actually be able to read and comprehend some pretty serious documents, because you're going to get contracts thrown at you, and you're going to have people coming after you. So you've got to have a good brain about you,
Mm.
so that you can be the best person you can be. So yeah, that
Absolutely.
classroom management is, yeah, it's a tricky one. You got to find that buy-in, and the more that these kids don't see the hook, then yeah, they don't want it.
feel the same way with university students. I think they're a bit more empathetic just because they're at that age where they feel bad if I'm, the only one talking. I think even if they're shy, one or two of them will be like, "Oh, I feel bad because she's just talking." So they're very lovely in that way. But even for me, it's the same thing that you said, that I try to relate it back to everything that I have learned about them. So which country they come from, what subject they're studying. Because for me, gaming cultures is an elective course that I teach. So you get students from all sorts of backgrounds. I've got students from finance, students from communication, students from environmental science. So all of these coming from different backgrounds, all wanting to do gaming cultures. And the thing is, they all bring such a plethora of knowledge from their particular fields that can all at the end be used within gaming. So an accounting student, for example, may really find enjoyment in learning about in-game currencies and the monetization of video games. Because
Mm.
every single thing within the video game industry, there's so many professions now that there's just everyone can benefit from a course like gaming cultures. It just asks you to think critically about the meta part of gaming as well as I guess, the micro part of gaming. Yeah, so that's a lot of fun for me as well to be like, okay, let's think about this. How does an environmental science student contribute to the gaming classroom? And what's the input that I may not have expected? And I'm always pleasantly surprised, which is great.
Yeah, I guess having students from diverse subject areas, but also you mentioned international students, so very diverse backgrounds. And you did I know you did your university here in Australia. Did you, were you born and raised in Australia? So,
No, actually, yeah.
where is so you're bringing a perspective into your classroom that many of these
Yes.
students don't have.
Correct, which is an interesting one as well because so for me, I've lived in Mumbai most of my life. So pretty much did all my schooling in Mumbai and only came to Australia in 2018 to do my master's, which was in communication. So I had already done my undergrad in English literature, and then I had done 1 year of an integrated course in journalism, where they sort of sent us to slums of Mumbai and asked us to find stories, which was pretty intense and awesome. And I think that also gave me a lot of perspective. And then I moved towards communication when I came over here, the dark side of journalism, as they call it. And then eventually realized that actually I don't want to go too much towards the dark side. I like video games and I like marketing and I like storytelling. So we'll find a niche over there. And I'm building towards that niche every year as well with that part of education within me. So, sorry, to come back to your question about me bringing a different background, it's great because when we have discussions within the classroom, I feel like my students, the international students in my class, don't feel like they have to keep it Western or Eurocentric in the approach. Because, say, for example, if we're talking about how video games are consumed in different countries. I could talk about India, for example, and how the esports aspect is so different. Like I was giving them an example, I was giving my students an example of how there's this game called Tekken. Have you heard of this one?
Yep, I used to play Tekken on a big giant, box. You'd feed well, at the time I think it was like 20 or 30 cents. You'd feed in, and you'd play Tekken against your friends.
Yeah, it's still going. So Tekken's been super, super popular. And I was telling my students about how in the esports scene of Tekken, Korea and Japan used to dominate. But then suddenly this one time, Pakistani players entered the tournament and they just immediately became the top contenders. So, and then it brings the question, how did that happen? And the answer to that question was, in Pakistan, the internet's not nearly as good as, say, Korea and Japan, where, people are sitting together having LAN parties. But for a game like Tekken, it doesn't really matter very much what kind of like internet connection you have, because you can just play 1v1 with your brother or your friends in the same room, right? So they had formed their own meta or their own style of playing that was very different to the mainstream style of playing, which was happening in the esports scene. So when they came into the picture, when Pakistan came in and joined the Tekken esports global scene, they just dominated it immediately. So yeah, and I was telling them about this example and also the example of African countries, Korea, China, how their cultures have led to the esports scene in their particular countries being completely different. And you can see the students' eyes light up when they see all these different examples being mentioned and their countries being mentioned every now and then. And then they like to compare and bring in, I'll ask them questions like, why do you think that is the case? And then they'll tell me some niche thing about the Chinese esports scene, for example. And yeah, that's where we're going back to sort of me learning from them and them learning from me as well.
Yeah, that's something I'd never would have imagined that Pakistani esports would be the killers in Tekken. So
Yeah,
it's and look, esports is such a growing, it's just such a growth industry
it
that
is.
I
It's
mean,
it's
there's
got billions of award, like billions being given away in award money in Saudi Arabia at the moment.
yeah, and like because a lot of people, I have the advantage of being in high school, so you're always hearing about games. I've got some, like I mentioned, Dan Martinez, who runs the Fuse Cup here in Australia, but also my kids have grown up in the gaming world. My eldest son is a game developer himself,
Very cool.
and so I've got a sort of a bit of an in, but I know that with esports, people just go, oh, it's just kids playing games, and it's just like, well, actually, if you look at these professional sports, like I'm a kid who grew up playing soccer and cricket and AFL, and so that's sport for me. But when you look at esports, like these guys have got nutritionists, they've got lawyers, they've got
Mm.
doctors, they've got psychologists, so they have everything that the traditional sports have, because they are competing in, and they are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into what they love.
Absolutely. And there's like, I guess the definition of athlete kind of varies, right? Because this is dexterity as well, especially if you're talking about using it's like micro dexterity, using your mouse with such precision, especially with first person shooter games. I think it's extremely legitimate and it's not easy. I know as someone who usually gets stuck on the gold rank and can't go any higher than that it takes a lot of skill to hit those higher ranks. Yeah, it's really cool. And to your point about all these different professions that exist within esports as well. I was thinking about it from the perspective of the businesses themselves who run esports teams. So, for example, in Australia, there's this team called Team Power. It's a big Fortnite team. And so they've got creators. Half of the team is professional Fortnite players, so they go globally for competitions. They compete over there. They bring trophies back to Australia. The other half of them are not as good as the others in the game, but they're extremely good content creators. They're entertaining. So then that part of them, they do the live streams, they do the branded partnerships, which is really awesome. So even from I guess, a business point of view, it's like there's that two-pronged approach where you have the athletes, the esports people, and then you have the content creators. Because people aren't necessarily watching someone because they're really good at the game. Sometimes they're watching them just because they're so relatable and so funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The content creators, or and the live streamers, they have a skill that is, you even like, you look at the sports commentators, the ones on, here on TV, the international cricket. I mean, you look at the commentators who do for golf, who a lot of the time there's a lot of dead air, but people still watch and they listen because they know how to strike up a conversation. They know how to just or keep the audience involved.
Absolutely. And it's so great because, I mean, I guess there's a positive and a negative to everything.
Oh
It's
yeah,
really good for brands, or it's very good for people to engage with these streamers. But at the same time, sometimes there's that issue of people forming parasocial relationships with streamers, whereby in their head they presume that this is my friend and they're talking to me. But it's more so a one-sided friendship. It's just that parasocial relationship. So it's also important. I guess for me, a very important philosophy. I don't know if I'd call it a philosophy, but to me, everything is about balance. And I think even in this case, it's like how do you, whether it's with teaching or advertising or streaming, it's like how do you balance where it's entertaining and then where it becomes like harmful? So that's sort of also something that I try to bring both in the classroom as well as to brands when I talk to them. I say you don't want to exploit your audience. You want to make sure that you are respectful of them and you are actually bringing some benefit to the table for the community as well.
This episode is proudly supported by the Busy School. Educators know better than anyone there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to learning, and for some young people, the right environment can make all the difference. The Busy School supports Year 11 and 12 students who have disengaged from mainstream education, smaller classes, individual support, practical learning, and real pathways to work or further study. There are no fees, with uniforms, supplies, and meals included. That helps remove barriers so students can focus on building confidence, reconnecting with learning, and taking their next step. The Busy School is part of the Busy Group, a not-for-profit with almost 50 years experience supporting people through education, employment, and training. Find a campus near you at busyschools.qld.edu.au. Yeah, which brings another key topic in of ethics. But what are ethics? Ethics are generally focused from someone's worldview, the way they were raised, or the experiences that they've had.
Yes.
And to sort of do a really hard pivot, because we're sort of talking about in the classroom, and you're explaining to these your students about all these different worldviews, and they've come into Australia, white Anglo Australia, and they've come into University of Queensland even wider, in that global sense, and they're trying to bring and explain their cultures in that world, but we hear on the news that an international student did this, or an international student
Yeah.
did this, or they've rorted the system, or they've whatever it might be. Often it's negative, which I'm sure is probably the most minute number of students, and there's also been the big push politically at the moment about migration to stop all these students coming in. But do you think that if that was to happen, that we would lose a richness that comes into Australia, into our universities and into our schools?
Absolutely. As somebody who loves academia as a world, the reason I love academia as a world is because it's all about finding all these different theories and all these different things, mixing them together and creating new knowledge, right? I feel the same way about universities. That's all that it's about. It's about bringing all these different perspectives, learning from each other and creating new knowledge. If you're going to take that away, you're going to take that richness away. And to your point about the negative things that people say sometimes, I hear it from, fortunately, not my co-tutors, but I've definitely heard on the grapevine people complaining about international students and or they can't even speak English properly. And I really feel for these students because, again, universities in general in Australia, they are very happy to take admissions from these students and bring them in here, and then they change their entire lives. They fly down here, they have to get accommodation and adjust and have that cultural shock as well of being in a completely new space. And it's again, what I really don't like is sometimes the inability to be completely fluent in English is mistaken for a lack of intelligence, which is
Yeah.
definitely not the case. These are very, very, very smart students. And actually, one thing that I'm really happy about is that there's more and more openness to the usage of translators in the class. I tell my students, please, if you just want to convert a thought that you have that you think you're not really able to express in English, use a translator. I just want to know your opinion. It doesn't matter. Language is a secondary thing. What's more important is what is the input you have, what is the thought that you have. So I think that there's positives that international students bring into Australia. And also, I guess, speaking from an economic point of view, the education sector, especially the higher education and the postgrad sector, is majority international students. And if we take that away, I think the economy of Australia is also going to suffer, which is a separate thing altogether.
Yeah, you bring some valuable points about misinformation, poor judgment of certain people. I mean, and then the amazing ability of technology to actually help communicate effectively within a classroom environment. I mean, I know as just a high school teacher, if we didn't have certain things and flexibilities in our classroom to use technology, it would just make life so much harder for our
Yes.
students. And the biggest frustration that I know, because I work with all students with ASD, so they're all on the autism spectrum. So some don't like to talk, but they have a tremendous amount to offer. Some talk too much, but they need help in making it succinct so that they can
Yes.
actually communicate more effectively. So with, translators, that helps them to put their thought out in a way that they can understand so that they can clearly communicate. And the technology is getting better and better, and it's doing a
Yeah.
much better job of that translation. So that must have been, I guess, even though you've only been, this course you said for 4 years,
Yes.
there
Yeah. It's
must
a
have been
very new course.
leaps and bounds in the advancements of the tech.
Absolutely. In the 4 or 5 years that I've been teaching, I need to really look into whether it's 4 years or 5 years. But in in this time that I have been teaching, most definitely. I mean, we had entirely online assignments before, and in order to combat, I guess, the extensive use of AI, we're now doing in-person quizzes in classroom as well, where you're going back to that traditional doing quizzes with your pen and paper as well, just so that, as a part of like one of the assignments that you do, so that students are actually participating and they feel like they have to contribute. So you have to find different ways of doing things. So it's like, on one hand, technology can be a little bit annoying in the way that it's very easy to find shortcuts.
Yep.
And on the other hand, it's great. It's great in the way that it helps you, as you mentioned, put your thoughts together, find a way to make them succinct or translate them, something as simple as translating it. So I guess that brings us back to that element of balancing, right? Just to find that little balance there. Because as much as AI has its flaws, and I'm sort of on that side of the, I guess I'm on the side that's a bit wary, especially in the creative side of things with AI.
Yes, definitely.
It's really, really good as your assistant, but the moment it starts thinking for you, it can't really do that because AI is incapable of original thought. So everything that it does is just patterns and whatever it guesses to be the best possible outcome. But you can't really come up with new ideas, which is, yeah, not the best when a student is writing a critical essay, if you're just hashing out the same things. Or for that matter, even with ideas in my professional life, in coming up with gaming campaign ideas. You want to do something fresh, something new, something award worthy, and that's not going to come from AI in terms of creativity.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. Like I use it a lot as an assistant. I use it to help tailor the direction I want to go in to help formulate my ideas better, and back a lot of back and forth. But when it comes to the creativity, I give it information to a point, and then I'm like, okay, I've got sort of some blocks that I need to build, but I have to do that myself. And it's a fine line to work out where that is. And we know that a lot of students, and you mentioned it before, the technology just helps create those shortcuts,
Yeah.
and students will often, for any number of reasons, want to find the shortest way
Yeah.
to get to the end goal. So with all that, with AI and with the technology and with things like that, and just wrapping up the talking about international students,
Yes.
with all those things, are other universities, because I know there's a lot of plagiarism, supposed AI, forgotten the word, but to pick up if they're using AI in their assignments, which we know don't work because it's creating a new artifact every single time you use it. But do you think universities are doing enough to protect the international students? And I mean, I know you work for university, so it's a bit of a dicey question there. But as a I guess a broad brush, do you think university students, international students, are being protected enough or supported enough?
Yeah, I can only speak for my course because I've really in between my two jobs at the moment, I've not really had a chance to speak to, I guess, teachers from other courses as much. But I feel like what I like about what we've done in this gaming cultures course is that we're not saying don't use AI. We say use AI, but then put down, or you have to one, make a declaration saying I have used AI or I haven't used AI. And if you have used AI, then you just mention what prompts you use and why you decided to use whatever section you decided to use. So essentially, they're doing a bit more work if they're using AI. But again, there's only so much you can verify. But we try not be overly pedantic about it because modes of cheating have existed forever.
Yeah.
It's just the style that has now it's become a lot more complicated now. But I mean, someone who wants to cheat will cheat. They'll find a way to do it. Essentially, you want to have that much trust in your students to go, hey, this is good for you if you come up with a creative thought and if you analyze it in a certain way. At the end of the day, if they want to cheat, they will end up doing it. There are some guardrails, I guess, we can put into place with AI declarations, having some assignments within the classroom with pen and paper. But there's only so much you can do. And that's okay. We have to move on with technology
It
and
is what
find
it
a
is,
way.
isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, correct. What's your opinion on this?
I think exactly what you're saying. Like those who will cheat will cheat.
Mm,
And it can be because they left it to the last minute. It's because they're lazy. It's because they don't. And I think a lot of the times they will use tools and resources that are readily available because they don't actually care about the assignment. So they're just like, I don't care. So I'm just, what's the easiest way? Bang. Like if I copy it, if I take it from Google and I put it into Grammarly and I make it humanized, and you do all this sort of stuff. It's like
yeah,
I've done the
yeah.
job, I've done the assignment, I've ticked the box. Let's move on to something I actually want to care about.
Yeah, it is my hope, however, that the ones who do decide to do it that way, that when they proofread it, they still learn something new. You hope,
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly. Yeah, that they pick up one or two ideas that they can move forward with.
Yeah,
And speaking of ideas and moving forward, this is to sort of throw back to your PR thing. And we're talking about, we've talked about content creation and things like that and education and
yeah.
getting that hook and the buy-in. A lot of teachers, a lot of educators are becoming content creators. They are making, and there's some amazing teachers out there who are doing amazing things to speak to their students and to students who wouldn't normally pay any attention. But how do you cut through? How do you find that thing that's going to resonate
Hmm.
and actually speak to your audience? And that's like, I guess you're putting your PR hat back on. Like, how does a teacher
Yeah.
do that? Like, what are some of the things or areas that they could look at to make sure that they get that buy-in?
So I would say, again, putting that teacher and the PR hat on here, I would say that one, it really depends on how precise you want to get with your audience. Is it boys? Is it girls? Is it under the age of 12? Is it 12 to 14? And then look at what are they consuming? What's trending in their life? And then you sort of take it from there. What resonates with them? What political ideologies are they following? For what reason? Do we want to steer them in a certain direction with common sense, not as a propaganda, but rather to
Yep.
show them that you must think more than what is served to you. Yeah, it's just like break down your audience, find out what they're interested in, your theories as a teacher, and then just find a way to embed that within their world. And then be engaging like a content creator. Talk to them, respond to them, engage with them. What I find with a lot of successful video game streamers is that they're extremely engaging. So I don't know if teachers are doing live streams, but when these guys do social media posts, for example, they'll say, The next video that I make, for example, will be based on a question you ask me. I'll pick the top question based on how many likes it gets. And then they ask them questions and then they create that video. So people love that stuff because they're like, I get to contribute, and then the content creator actually does a video based on my questions. Wherever people feel heard, I feel it works successfully as a content creator.
Yeah, well, something that actually blew my mind about exactly what you're talking about, just people feeding in and talking at the time, was Coachella this year.
Yeah.
Had that, it was sponsored by YouTube, so immediately it's got a buy in there. But I saw Justin Bieber, he was performing, so he's got his laptop, he's singing, his songs, but then he's jumping on and people are talking to him, his fans are talking to him, and they're going, "Oh, throwback to this song, I missed this," and then all of a sudden he just cues it up, and off
Wow.
he goes, and then and immediately I can see, like, what an amazing way to captivate an audience and fans that
Yes.
either couldn't afford to be at Coachella, live in another country, and just want to be part of the experience. And yeah, just that buy-in straight away of, hey, you're actually heard. And
Yeah,
that
it's
what
beautiful.
is that what customers and clients and people, they want to have their voice heard? Is that the key win, really?
Do you mean with brands wanting the audiences to
Yeah,
hear them? Yeah,
yeah.
I would say what brands want us to be relevant because every year there's a new generation. More people are being born, more people are hitting 35 and being like, I don't care about anything anymore. It's just probably just me like using myself as an example. But, in order to stay relevant as a brand, you can't just rely on the popularity you have at the moment. The political opinions of people are going to change. What they find cool is going to change. So just to stay relevant, that's what brands want. They want to be on top of mind and they want you to buy their product or their service. And they want you to be loyal. Ideally, that's what every single brand wants. They want you to be loyal to them in whatever vertical it is that they're providing a product or service in. So how do you make that happen is, I guess, if people genuinely associate positivity with your brand. And one way of doing it, I guess, is supporting the video game community because 85% from the last stats that I checked within Australia, 85% of the people are gamers, which is,
Oh,
it's not a small little niche anymore. It's the mainstream audience at this point. So for brands, it's like, how do you get in? How do you talk to gamers like gamers? And yeah, how do you not come across as a try hard?
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so on the flip side to that, because I mean, being the ability with, and we've talked about AI quite a bit, the ability to create your own game now, even just a small mobile game, is quite, quite simple to get the bones and get it sort of working, and then you have to get a developer to, if you want to really enhance it. But how would then a small independent, a small indie developer, how would then they be able to get in contact with a big brand to go, hey, our values align. I love what your latest sustainability model is based on. That really aligns with what we want to do. How how can they join up? Because I'm sure these big
Yeah.
brands would just get swamped with, a tremendous amount of emails and spam and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. It would be, again, I'm not really on the game development side of things, but I reckon this is just me thinking based on conversations I've had with people who are working within the industry, such as your son. And it's like, so in order to reach out to these brands, have a portfolio. You need to have something to show because there's so many developers out there. It's like, why would we go with you? There's a lot of risks that you are taking as a brand when you're deciding to spend that, put a particular budget behind a video game, which is also the reason why, unfortunately, a lot of smaller developers are not able to make a lot of profits because then you have these bigger video games like Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft be like, hey, why go for a new game when you can just build a map within our pre-existing game? And a lot of
Yeah.
brands will do the safer thing and just go for creating a customized map on Fortnite. And, it might be successful, or maybe people only use it for a month and then nobody ever joins that map again. So it's a bit of a hit or miss, but I am hopeful that there are brands out there that are willing to partner with smaller developers and put in the budget behind it. It's just about being a good salesperson. And I find that, I guess with smaller teams, you've got very passionate people who are very good at game development or writing stories or being on just the production side of it, but sometimes not that great at sales and marketing.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe that's where that combinative approach needs to happen. Because you never know. You also don't want the brand to exploit you because they're like, huh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Let me just take his game and, do a shitty contract.
Yeah. Yeah, give them
Yeah,
what they think what they think they want. Yeah.
yeah,
And look, the reason I ask that is, we talk about, the ability for students to develop things pretty quickly. But also, like, there's a lot of growth in education now in the subject area is entrepreneurship. So, these kids have some amazing ideas and they want to move forward with them, but it's that, how do they communicate that effectively? How do they back themselves to and you don't want to sell out, but you definitely need to sell yourself to go, hey,
yes,
I'm worthwhile. I'm have a go, and we can, because I mean, my kid, one of my classes, I do sort of an innovation thing, and just trying to get them their heads wrapped around what innovation is. We're
yeah,
watching Shark Tank, and they're like, "That's a dumb idea. That's a great idea. Oh, I never thought about it." And so they just love that. And I was explaining to them, like, the ones who win are the ones who are able to sell themselves, even if
yeah.
they don't have the best product at the time. They are so invested in it, and
Mm.
they are so passionate about it that that's what is actually purchased, the passion, not the product.
It's such an important skill to have as well. And in our gaming cultures class, before we jump into video games, we usually talk about board games as precursors to video games. And your point on sales is taking me back to this game. It's called Snake Oil. Have you heard of it?
No, I've not heard of that one.
Okay, so Snake Oil is this board game, which I think maybe I should bring into my classroom to. I think it can equip people with really good sales skills. So the idea behind this board game is that you're playing with a group of people, and there is one person who acts as a target audience, right? And they are the ones who decide who the winner is. So essentially, I pick a card. Say my card says, I am an alien from Mars. Everybody else picks up a card, and it's a product or a service. They combine two words and create a product. So, for example, somebody tells me, hey, Mr. Alien from Mars, I think you should buy this portal gun because it'll help you go from planet A to planet B. Somebody else might have a really terrible set of cards, and the best that they could come up with is paper bags, for example. And then it's just like about coming up with a really good sales pitch for a paper bag for an alien from Mars. So I find that games like that are also really, really, really good ways to get people to think critically and creatively about sales. Again, this is me telling you that board games, video games, or just a sense of play is so good to equip students with all these very, very real life skills.
Oh yeah, it's and I mean that we could spend another hour talking about
Yeah.
gamification in education, because that's the big thing. It's about, well, how do we get them? How do we trick them into learning? And
Yes.
games is a great way to do it. But yeah, like I said, we could go. I had a ton of questions for you,
Oh
and
my gosh, I'm
we,
sorry. I get so excited and passionate, and this is a great podcast. Like this conversation has been so lovely, and I'm sorry if I got carried away and took a lot of your time, but
no,
it's been
no, and
fun. Yeah.
that's what I love. I love having the conversation. I love just having it weave through different things back and forth. And to hear about different things that are wholly within education, but also education adjacent, that we as teachers need to know about and need to understand, so that we can better equip our students to get them to the next level of success, whether that's wherever that might be, with game development, esports, you know lecturing at university, storytelling, whatever it might be. So
The
yeah, it's been
possibilities are endless.
with creative and critical thinking. If we teach those skills, I think anything is possible. That's for sure.
Definitely with you on that one.
Now, I want to be respectful of your time as well. So I just want to wrap up this amazing conversation just with a couple of questions just to finish up. Now, we connected through LinkedIn. I put out a post about, hey, was anyone be interested in having a chat? And you graciously put your hand up. So I thank you for that. But if
Oh,
anyone wanted to get in contact with you about either PR or marketing or what you do in the university space, what would be the best way to do that?
I'd say LinkedIn would be the best way because it's something I definitely check on a day-to-day basis. So that would just be my name, which is Vindhya Barwal. I tell people that my name is like Vindhya from India because that's just easier to remember. But yes, LinkedIn would be the best way to find me.
All right, I'll put your profile link in the show notes
I
for the rest
appreciate
of
it.
the.
And it's been such a pleasure chatting. You don't really get to have these conversations for such a long time. Even this, I say long time, but it doesn't feel long enough at all. We could, as you mentioned, talk about it for another hour or two, but it's been such an enlightening conversation and just a great back and forth.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and you have been an amazing guest and sharing some. Yeah, I love finding out people's passions, but people's stories and how it all intertwines. Because I think I spoke to you off camera. I think last time we chatted was it's it's about building those relationships and putting some good news out into this
Yes.
world that often in our areas of education, often it's a lot of negativity. So it's great to
Yeah,
have a
you don't want to
positive
be. I
conversation.
think nihilism is something we want to go away from. We want to be full of optimism and passion and, forward looking. Be aware of like the negative things as well, but not be bogged down by it too much because there's so much beauty and so much passion in the world and in education. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, my last question is, and it wouldn't be the Tattoo Teacher podcast if I didn't ask, Vindhya, do you have any tattoos?
I do actually. I have just the one tattoo, which is two bull sharks, and they've got little shadows underneath them, and it's actually representative of the city, Brisbane City, because it's taught me so much, and it's been such a place of growth and opportunity for me that I love Brisbane. So it's an ode to the city that I've got these bull sharks on my ankle.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's another checkbox in the teachers with tattoos. So that's what I like to see. But Vindhya, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing and for your passion in the gaming industry, which speaks to all of our students in one form or another. So thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and for just such a rich conversation.
Thank you, and thanking you right back for the rich conversation. And thanks for having me.
You enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. See you, Philip. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.